James Hubert Blake, beginning in 1899, at the ripe old age of 6, when you composed Charleston Rag. You have, as composer and piano virtuoso, helped to create a new, distinctly American musical idiom of ragtime, jazz, popular music, and musical comedy. Of the many successes that followed, one, I'm Just Wild About Harry, is enshrined as a classic of Americana, and some say it helped to win a presidential election. You are a leader in the Afro-American cultural flowering known as the Harlem Renaissance, and you have made a permanent contribution to the musical heritage of all Americans. Now, at 91, you enthusiastically share your art with scholars and college students, and to our constant joy, remain a vibrant and generous performer. In profound admiration and gratitude, I am pleased, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Governors of Rutgers, the State University, to confer upon you honoris causa, the degree of Doctor of Fine Arts, with all the rights, privileges, and immunities pertaining thereto, here and elsewhere. I'd love you to.
I want to thank the faculty and Mr. I don't know whether it's a professor or what, Mr. Blomstein for this. You know, I'd like to tell this audience, and I have a purpose for telling this audience this. My mother and my father were slaves. I hold nothing against the people who held them because they thought they were right at the time. And here I am receiving a doctorate. And I thank you, and I thank the good Lord above too.
The Rutgers University Office of Educational Radio and Television invites you to join us for the next 25 minutes as we examine New Jersey, musically speaking. This special 13-week series is heard in place of the Rutgers University Forum and is brought to you in the public interest by this station. Here's your hostess for New Jersey, musically speaking, Anne Marie Cook.
I believed in you, then I was glad. Now I'm deceived in you, and now I'm sad. My poor heart is aching, it's almost breaking, and it's all your yeah. That's the first song that Eubie Blake ever wrote. It was written for Miss Sophie Tucker.
You've just heard a hit from the year 1915. It was composed and played by jazz pianist Eubie Blake. This man, at the age of 91, recently received an honorary degree from Rutgers State University, and here with me to discuss his life and work is David Kayer, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Committee for the Humanities and co-editor of the Journal of Jazz Studies. Hello and welcome, David. Tell me, why is Eubie so important to Rutgers University?
Well, he has old connections to New Jersey because he was a fixture of the New Jersey musical scene, the popular musical scene, back when Atlantic City was the Las Vegas of America, when it was the key to all popular entertainment. As early as 1905, Eubie was playing in Atlantic City as a young man, as a well-established ragtime player. So he has old ties here, and he has special ties to Rutgers because that excerpt you just heard was part of some oral history recording that Eubie has done for the Rutgers Institute of Jazz Studies. He was accompanied, incidentally, by Willie the Lion Smith, an old Newark resident who was also a great jazz pianist before his recent death, and the two friends got together for an interview on behalf of the Rutgers Institute of Jazz Studies as part of an oral history project.
Where did Eubie start out?
Well, he was born in Baltimore, the child of slaves back in 1883. Lived in a very poor but extremely respectable and hard-working family, and found that he picked up the piano almost by ear. He was composing long before he'd ever been taught to read music, and as a youngster, still in knickers, he would go up to bed and then sneak out down a drain pipe and go to play in a sporting house, as they would be called in those days. And his parents, of course, would never have approved of this, but he kept a pair of long pants out in the woodshed and would sneak out and earn some money. And his mother discovered this sordid night career by accident and was about to punish him very, very severely when it was revealed that he was hiding all the money from these ill-gotten gains under the carpet, and that his earnings were about the same of both of his parents combined. When the situation was reassessed and his career in popular music advanced further and was launched. And by the time he wrote It's All Your Fault, he was well established in Atlantic City. The song, as he just said at the end, was written for Sophie Tucker, who was just beginning to emerge as a big star, and she made it a big hit for Blake and for the man who wrote the words, his longtime partner and still his friend, Noble Sissel. So that this song is important, I guess, as kind of an example of pop music in New Jersey around World War I, and also as launching the career of Blake and Sissel.
When did the ragtime era start, and about how long did it last?
Well, the ragtime became the popular music of America just, say, in the late 1890s. Blake wrote his notable success, Charleston Rag. As I say, before he'd even been taught to read music. He wrote Charleston Rag in 1899, and that was the same year that Scott Joplin wrote the Maple Leaf Rag, which has become the great rag classic. By about this period of 1915, you had new trends coming in, more popular music, music perhaps of a slightly smoother melody, and other forms of jazz-related music than ragtime. And the ragtime era was pretty much over by the end of World War I.
What typifies ragtime music?
Well, it's the word ragtime is thought to come from ragged time. The music is sharply syncopated, very sharply accented, and very often the accents are on the measures where you don't expect it. It isn't 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But notes where you expect an emphasis are skipped completely, and other notes are emphasized. So the music has that kind of perky, highly syncopated beat quality, which I guess we associate with the popular dances of that day too, the turkey trot. And I suppose in our minds, because we've so often heard it done that way, we associate it with Charlie Chaplin silent films and all of that kind of herky-jerky music. But it was a music that could be soft and sweet and very melodious while retaining these accents, and it was music that was written. It was not improvised like most jazz. It was written with tempo markings, and it was primarily a published music. Scott Joplin was a very accomplished composer who wanted to write operas and symphonies using some of these rag techniques, so that it was by no means a primitive or unsophisticated music. It was an extremely sophisticated music, and it was closely tied to the classical music of the period and to the semi-classical music. John Philip Sousa, for example, loved ragtime, and the ragtime players in turn could take a piece like Semper Fidelis or the Stars and Stripes Forever and rag it. And I have a recording with me of Eubie playing at the age of 86 back in 1969 when his second great career started. And Eubie played a version of Stars and Stripes Forever, which was like a ragtime equivalent of what Vladimir Horowitz would do to John Philip Sousa's music as well. So here's Eubie Blake at the age of 86 playing Stars and Stripes Forever.
that was Stars and Stripes played in ragtime around the turn of the century, but does Eubie still keep on composing in ragtime?
Well, now that ragtime is staging a comeback in our own time, Eubie has returned to it after a long period in other forms of jazz and popular music, and he has tried to keep his hand in. I have another recording of a piece that he wrote at about the same time he did the Stars and Stripes. He was in his middle 80s, and he wrote a piece called Blue Rag in 12 Keys, and that's kind of a reflection of the fact that these old piano players considered it extremely important, a mark of distinction, to be able to play almost any piece in almost any key, because they might be called on at a moment's notice to play with a band, or even more important, to accompany a singer whose range would be more limited than that of the piano, and they would have to be able to play almost anything. Well, to show his versatility in an ability to play in keys, in his middle 80s, he wrote this piece, which is called A Blue Rag in 12 Keys.
That was Blue Rag in 12 Keys, played at the age of 86 by Eubie Blake. Well, Dave, during the 20s when ragtime wasn't popular, what was Eubie doing?
Well, by 1915, with It's All Your Fault, he had launched his partnership with Noble Sissel and moved very much into theater music. Together, they wrote tunes they wrote great shows, among them the first important all-black musical of the 20s called Shuffle Along, which had Josephine Baker in the chorus line. Later, they wrote a tune that formed the first duet ever sung by Noel Coward and Gertrude Lawrence together. So they had a very active career during the 20s, because that was an era of the so-called Harlem Renaissance, a great awakening of black American literature, poetry, music, painting. And that great period, particularly in New York, but elsewhere as well, enabled black artists to achieve a kind of prominence that they perhaps have not enjoyed again until our own time, until very recently. And during this period, they helped play a very important part in the popular and jazz side of this by writing these great shows, including Shuffle Along in 1921, at the very beginning of the period. One of the hits of that is something that they recorded back in 1921 when Blake and Sissel were an important popular recording team. And when they recorded one of their own tunes called Love Will Find a Way. Now, they're still great friends, and way back when Eubie was 86 and Noble Sissel was 80, they appeared in a college concert and did it again. So what we're going to do is listen to Noble Sissel, age 32, and Eubie Blake, age 38, leading into the tune, and then finish up Love Will Find a Way as they recorded it some 48 years later.
Come, dear, and don't let our faith weaken. Let's keep our love fires burning bright. Your love for me is a heavenly beacon, guiding me on through love's darkest night. Don't start minding or fault finding, no matter how dark the path may grow. Fate won't hurry, so don't worry. We'll just keep our hearts aglow. For love will find a way. Those skies now are gray. Love like ours can never be rude. Mr. Cupid ain't school that way. So dry each tear-dimmed eye. Those old dark clouds will soon roll by. Though fate may lead us astray, my darling, mark what I say. Love will find a...
That was Love Will Find a Way by Eubie Blake and Noble Sissel. Two versions, one a few years ago and one 48 years before that. Dave, Eubie's had quite an interesting educational background, getting an honorary degree at the age of 91. How did he start?
Well, I think he left school in about the 8th grade, and an incident that he sometimes recalls involves the throwing of a snowball through a window and an unjust, he says, accusation that he was the culprit. At any rate, he did leave school as a young teenager and followed this career. He had rather good musical training in Baltimore, but he had very little formal education, and then he retired in 1946 in his mid-60s and enrolled at New York University as a student in music, and at the age of 66 got his degree in music from NYU, learning the so-called Schillinger system there, which is a totally new musical system to him, and in which he then started to compose. But now, as his new career has blossomed in his late 80s, he's become a fixture on college campuses. He's played at Rutgers. He won the Rutgers Special Award before this honorary degree, the James P. Johnson Award, named after another great composer, pianist who was a native of New Brunswick, New Jersey. He's appeared on all the television talk shows and with the Boston Pops. And since the age of 89 or 90, he's had concerts in Tully Hall, Town Hall. He's been at the Newport Jazz Festival. He's played in Europe. He refused to fly until just a couple of years ago. So he was limited to train, car, and boat. But now his career has blossomed so much that he sees the need to fly, and he will do so unwillingly. And he's been all over the country. He's a man of great warmth, whether in a classroom or on a popular TV talk show. He just has a million stories to tell and just a bubbling and effervescent personality. And he's been the subject of a book, Reminiscing with Blake and Sissel, which came out just last year, written by Robert Kimball of Yale and William Balcom, a composer, a young classically trained composer who loves ragtime. And the two men interviewed Blake and Sissel and got out a book about it.
Back to his music, one of the tunes he composed, which I think are a little more familiar and popular, is called I'm Just Wild About Harry. That was popular during the Truman administration, wasn't it?
Well, it became the kind of unofficial campaign song, and Eubie will still pass out the souvenir editions of I'm Just Wild About Harry, which had campaign lyrics on it. But originally, he had a very different view of I'm Just Wild About Harry. Eubie thought it was that the melody suggested a kind of lilting, sentimental waltz, and he wanted to put it into Shuffle Along as a kind of Viennese touch, and it would have sounded something like this. Well, that was talked out by Eubie and his partner and the star of the show, and they felt they wanted something more commercial, more sacco. And Eubie will say, well, they were always more commercial, and he was always the artist of the group, but I think he admits that he came up with a bigger hit, and one in which he's enjoyed royalties now for half a century and more. I'm Just Wild About Harry. And here's Noble Sissel singing his lyrics to it with Eubie playing. And once again, you're listening to a man who plays this at 86, looks perhaps 56, and plays like 26.
And I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about me. The heavenly blisses of his kisses fill me with ecstasy. Oh, he's sweet like chocolate candy. He's just like honey from the bee. That's why I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about. Can I do without Harry's wild about? I gotta go now. Go ahead, man. You wrote it, play it. That's why I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about. Can I do without Harry's wild about me?
That was an old popular tune written by Eubie Blake and played there by him. I'm Just Wild About Harry. Dave, what did Rutgers give Eubie his degree for? Are there any special commendations they made for
Well,
him?
the citation read something like this. James Eubie Blake, as composer and piano virtuoso, you have helped shape the development of American ragtime, jazz, popular music, and musical comedy. The son of former slaves, you created in your native Baltimore, in New York, and in the resorts of the New Jersey shore, a part of the American musical heritage, and became a musical leader in the Afro-American cultural flowering known as the Harlem Renaissance. Through your willingness to share your art and reminiscences with scholars and college students, you have launched a new career at the age of 86 and remain a vibrant and generous performer at 91.
And on that jazzy note, I'd like to say thank you to David Kerr, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Committee for the Humanities and co-editor of the Journal of Jazz Studies, for being with us today to talk about Eubie Blake. I hope you'll be with us next week when we take a look at the big band era in New Jersey. We'll have Paul Weiss, a big band record collector from Sayreville, who will bring us some of the sounds of remote broadcasts from such places as the Meadowbrook Dinner Theater and the Point Pleasant Casino. And I really hope you'll be with us. It should be an enjoyable program. For New Jersey Musically Speaking, I'm Anne Marie Cook.
New Jersey Musically Speaking, a special 13-week series heard each week at this time in place of the Rutgers University Forum. For further information regarding this week's program, write Radio Center, Rutgers University, New Brunswick, New Jersey. Be sure to be with us next week at the same time for another look at New Jersey Musically Speaking.